Yanick, I'd like to know about your beginnings. You began to draw comics in Canada, it's right?
Not really. There's no real market of comics in Canada. I mean, there is, but it's more independent stuff. I'm from Montreal, so I had either access to the American market, where I ended up working, or the European market with Dargo, the French, Belgium market. And I choose the American in part because it was easier for me. They were producing a lot more comics. It was just easier, I guess. I think my first few comics were adaptation of TV shows, like Xena Warrior Princess and X-File, that kind of stuff.
Space Above and Beyond.
Space Above and You will inform, my friend. You will inform.
I like that show.
Yeah, I mean, it was all right. It did pretty bad, I guess. I didn't get watched that much. But yeah, in that show, there was like a very hard-to-draw ship. The alien ship, it's some sort of bunch of triangles and like arcs between them. It's very, very hard. So after trying to draw it like a few times, I actually ended up building my own model. That was my first comic, so I kind of overkilled it. But there was no other way to figure that shit out, that ship out without building it entirely. So and I did.
Babylon 5 and Stargate have more beautiful spaceships.
I guess so. I mean that ship was original. It's just very hard to draw.
Okay.
Yeah.
We didn't know until we research, but you draw erotic comics, that's right?
Yeah. My very first back in the day when the market crashed, after the image bubble exploded, there was a small press in Montreal, and they were like, yeah, well, comic is dead and it's over, and you guys should do other stuff than graphic storytelling because companies left and right are dying. But the only company that thrives still is Heroes Comic, and they were doing it. That was the branch of Fantagraphic that was doing erotic material. And we were young, me and Michel Lacombe, which ended up inking me on many things, including Batman Inc., for instance, years and years after that. And we were young, and we're like, oh, all right, well, if that's the only thing we got to do, we're gonna write and draw an erotic story, which we did, and we sent it to Heroes, and they liked it. And they just asked for more sex scene. They were really obsessed with it, and we tried to find any excuses to have more sex scene in it. I mean, it's a weird early work, but I've learned a lot doing it. Yeah, that's officially my first comic, I guess.
Oh.
So ever.
Would you say those comics were an inspiration for you to draw Wonder Woman Art 1?
No. Well, I've never been awkward with sexuality. I never felt it as a taboo. Maybe because of horticulture. I'm French Canadian, and we're much more liberal than your average American, I guess, which view sex as a hot potato and they have a hard time dealing with it. I don't have any problem with it. And in the case of Wonder Woman Earth 1, as Grant wanted to explore some of the early material of the 40s, which is the voice of God. He wanted to re-explore the 40s, which was filled with bondage, like an erotic undertone, barely hidden, under the surface of themes. I felt totally alright exploring that again. It's no big deal. But that one is an erotic material. It's just that Morrison was very, very modern in terms of his view of sexuality in his own life, but also in fiction. Wonder Woman eventually evolved away from that weird genesis of alternative sexuality, and she became more a typical superhero. But it's still there somewhere if you explore it deeper a little, like Grant is doing.
What's the difference for you to work in Wonder Woman, the run with Luke Ross, and the Earth 1 with Grant Morrison?
Well, with Wonder Woman Earth 1 is more my baby. I can explore and try weird things. I feel a lot more freedom. I always love getting on books again. I always love getting on books first, like on Swamp Thing, the relaunch of New 52. It was my baby. I could do whatever I wanted and shape it to my own needs. And same thing with Wonder Woman Earth 1. So everything in this, I'm happy with. It's my own little thing. And The regular Wonder Woman, it's more like a common toy for everybody, so everybody explore it, but there's a common ground, so it's less personal.
How do you compose your pages? How do you think about the narrative?
He has a lot to say, this guy. It really depends on the story. I try to take advantage of comic as an art form in a way that a book or movie cannot. So I really explore panels. And Wonder Woman on the second volume, because we're doing 2 more volumes after the first one, there's some SS soldiers, Nazi soldiers coming on the island, and I'm exploring for the battle borders some of those SS, like the black and white and the swastikas and that designs. I'm exploring them again in order to get some cool panel design for them. In the case of Swamp Thing, it came out of necessity almost, because when Swamp Thing goes to the green, which is the consensus of plant, I needed some sort of crazy acid trippy looking feel to it, and when Alan Moore was doing those scenes, Swamp Thing would just float in like nothingness, like another dimension, obviously. But with Scott Morrison, with Scott Snyder, we needed mini panels to make a more proper storytelling. So the content of the panels are pretty down to earth in terms of the storytelling, has been very classic and conservative. But all the panel border are crazy. So this is where the information is that you are in the green. And by doing so, I've created the panel border for when the rot is acting on reality, and every type of panel, it's like the soundtrack, you know, when you listen to Star Wars and then Yoda showed up and then you got a Yoda team from John Williams. I tried to do the same with the panel border in Swamp Thing. When the evil is acting on reality, well, the panel is, and sometimes the panel gets there before the bad stuff happen, like a eerie soundtrack, like just a warning of what things to come.
Nice. Talk about the artists that influenced you. For example, that print of something, it sounds like Alphonse Mucha.
I love Art Nouveau. I have many people. I think the most obvious could be Kevin Nolan. I'm a huge fan of Bernie Wrightson and his understanding of double lighting and double light sources. I integrated that very early on in my love of graphic design. And Kevin Nolan somehow does the same kind of double light, but in a much more modern, solid fashion. And that became my most predominant influence, I would say. But there is a lot of Mike Mignola, a lot of Jim Lee. I mean, because I'm 42 now, I was there when Jim Lee was the absolute god of the universe. So nobody could escape his influence. And even though it doesn't look Jim Lee in its but the rendering of what I do, it's some of the dynamic poses maybe, or some of the way I broke the story down. There's a lot of Jim in this.
Did you read the old Swamp Thing's books to draw yours?
Yeah, well, I was a big fan before that. I was a big fan of the Len Wein Bernie, because I'm a big fan of Bernie Wrightson. But also I'm a big fan of Alan Moore. And so I've read a long time ago all the Alan Moore. And to me, these books came out as a revelation, because it pushed the boundary of what the American comic is so much. I mean, it's not about damsel in distress anymore. And it's a lot more complex and rich. And that reinvigorates my love of American comic. And yeah, when they offered me to do Swamp Thing, actually they offered me a bunch of books for the New 52. There was a list, but in that list there was Swamp Thing, and I just couldn't refuse it.
You worked with him before, right?
What?
You worked with Alan Moore before, right?
Yeah, I did 2 years of Terra Obscura with Alan,
which we like so much.
He's the man. Honestly, I would have stayed at ABC doing Terra Obscura for years and years and years. Like, it was read by elites, so it's not like big crazy crowd of people reading it, but it was so fun to draw and so fun to be able to interact with Alan on that, and yeah, I would have just kept drawing this for decades, but he left the building. You know, Elvis left the building, and it was pointless.
Also, you to work with characters so classic and so forgotten in Terra Obscura.
Yeah. Well, these were at the time. All right, you got to understand that Alan Moore is against any systems, or he's an anarchist, and when Jim Lee sold Wildstorm, that was including ABC to DC Comics, he made sure from that point on that it would not invent anything that can be in any way owned by a big major corporation. So all the book that he ended up doing from that point on was public domain character, like those characters from Terra Obscura. You can do a Terra Obscura book today. Maybe not the title is maybe owned by somebody, but all these characters, they're free to go.
We like to for you to bring a message for the Brazilian viewers, some kind of advice or anything you want. Our viewers are not so sensible, so you can talk anything you want.
Yeah, well, comic now are a lot more international than they used to be, and a lot more diverse than when I started in a few years. And you got people like Raphael that is pushing the envelope. But there's a lot of awesome Brazilian artists now. So the culture of comic is worldwide, and everybody can aspire to add something to it, and something diverse. It's not just about people in tights throwing cars. You know, it could be all sort of things. So yeah, I'm really enthusiastic to look at what's going to come from other countries than just the American, which seems to be a bit trapped sometimes in their own ways. So yeah, so that includes Brazil, something like that.
Did you try any caipirinha?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, first day it was pretty much caipirinha day. Yeah, it was. So it's all right. I'm good.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Thank you. Have fun. Thanks, man. Thank you.